This evening's seminar is being brought to you by Deirdre Silverstein, who's here with me. I'm Tom Cowan, and this is a seminar by the Deep Business Initiative, and it is about the use of AI in production operations in business. And the specific idea tonight is around, I guess the question, Deirdre, that you and I have been asking ourselves here specifically is, why are we not treating AI as any other tech buy that an organization does? Why are we not treating it with that same seriousness? And fortunately, we have a couple of folks that know this subject very well with us tonight. So with that, Deirdre, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. This is a discussion group, so you are going to wind up doing a lot of the work tonight. But let me start by framing the conversation. Back in April, we started to talk about in our Sunday workshop, how does a leader make decisions about AI? What's the decision-making process a leader has to go through. On the 21st, we plan to talk about three areas. One was what leaders are seeing, hearing, and reading about AI. The second is what information can they actually use to support their strategic work, decision-making, and leadership responsibilities. And then finally, what do they actually need and they're not getting right now so that they can make informed decisions about AI? Well, given all of the conversation and discussions and questions, we only got through a part of that presentation. So we decided to start a monthly AI discussion group to keep going through these critically important topics of a leader deciding to use AI in an organization. Now, leading up to the April 21st discussion, I had done a literature review. And if you've watched the video or participated in the April 21st session, by the video, I mean we have a video of the workshop that we gave on the 21st out on YouTube. If you've watched that or participated in the discussion, you know that we went through in some detail what the literature is telling leaders. And by and large, what they're hearing is a lack of definition, a lack of completeness, a lack of guidance, a lack of use cases. There's more cheerleading out there along the lines of, you've got to be using this stuff because your people want you to use it, which really means nothing to a leader. And I'm speaking now as someone who's held multiple C-suite roles and know that the decision-making process is more complicated than that. Now, since the 21st, I've continued to review the literature, and there's been a distinct turn, and it's been very interesting. This has almost been in the past month in what the literature is saying. There's no more of the gee whiz, you've got to use this stuff, but more of, frankly, are we ready to use this stuff? Is AI delivering business results, or are the current products ready for business use? There are a lot of nagging questions, and these are the types of questions that every leader needs to understand, needs answers for before they can make informed decisions about the use of AI. Now, I have just completed anything I'm going to do in terms of a lecture. This is actually a discussion group. And as I said, you're going to be doing most of the work here. So what I'm going to do to get the discussion going is to jump in with a question. And this is actually a multi-part question. Give you a second to think about it and then ask you to comment. And the question is, thinking as a leader, do you consider AI to be ready for use in your business? This is given what you're reading. Do you think that enough work has been done on the technology itself for it to be trusted? Remember that AI is a learning technology, that the algorithms are regularly retrained and updated, and they're starting to train themselves without direction from humans. Do you think that this is stable enough for a leader to decide to make this technology an important part of the business? Remember also that one of the prime concerns of leader is the whole topic of enterprise risk. Is there risk in using this technology? So now I'm going to stop talking and ask you to jump in and give us your opinions about this. What do you think?
So Deirdre, I just want to take a moment. We have a couple of distinguished guests with us tonight. So we have Professor Nahid is with us. She is there. And also you're and my friend and colleague, Professor Shearer.
That's right.
And he is there. There's
There's
Nahid. I
Nahid.
saw you. And
And there's
there's
Doug.
Doug. Yes, in a familiar background. How are you, man?
Okay.
Great to see you.
So
So,
these people should be absolutely
oh,
willing to jump in
absolutely. I
and
mean,
talk about.
there's no reason why we can't have an opinion from Doug or Nahid on this. I mean, we know
And
Srinivasan
it
would have
is, yeah.
opinions, but
So basically, is this technology stable enough to be used in any sort of meaningful way in an organization? What do you think, guys?
Hey, I'll jump in. And it's an honor to be here with you guys. I'm really enjoying your presentation. The
the honor is ours, Doug. Seriously, we love having you part of what we do.
I'll tell you, for me, it depends what the usage is. And but whatever even with that decision point, I think you still need human oversight over whatever output it's giving. I have just experienced just with ChatGPT, taking a JSON data set, feeding it in, and just starting to ask questions without even telling it what the definition of the fields is, and getting amazing results. But yet, I don't know that I would release that to the enterprise.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been interesting that a couple of studies have been done recently. By recently, I mean within the past, or published within the past 2 or 3 weeks, saying, look, you can't trust the search results at all because there's no context, because of the way it's calculated,
Mm.
because of the statistical methods used to do the search terms and so forth. It's fascinating. So,
Nahid, you have to have an opinion on this stuff.
And I'm still learning like everybody else
Oh, yes.
regarding this case. First, I would say I need to learn much more about it, but at the same time, as Dieter said, you have to perform sort of a kind of a risk analysis to see pros and cons. That's the way I look at it for any technology, and to see if you have the capability of using or the need for, and you can mitigate the risks in place. So there are so many factors in this new technology, and there are so many unknowns. That's the way I look at it. But at the same time, you cannot stop using it. I was watching a program on TV regarding how the teenagers are using it now. And it's growing so quickly. But the question I have, which is I have to learn a lot about this new technology, is what are the benefits and what are the risks, and how can I mitigate the risk? And at this moment, I don't have the answers, but there are a lot need to be research on that before deciding to use it as an enterprise. That is short answer.
No, I completely agree. So Amit, what's your view about this? How do you think about it?
I believe AI is a pretty powerful technology. It depends, based on the industries that it's used in. Most of us who are just new to it view ChatGPT as AI, but it's just one application of AI. I use ChatGPT all day long to make my life easier, but I also do my fact checks. And I understand the subject well enough where AI then augments the work that I need to do. So I think it's very powerful. And like everybody else said, any really good technology has both sides to it, and it needs to be carefully understood before it is utilized or even penetrated within the organization. That would be my starter view of AI.
You said
Srinivas, I
something.
know that you're a dead cold expert on this stuff. You work on it all day long. What's your view?
I mean, AI is in, as Amit and Nahid has pointed out, AI is in multiple technologies, multiple views and ways of using AI. We've been doing that since last at least 7-10 years, right?
Yeah.
In various forms, whether it's conversation AI, chatbots, RPA, document understanding or document, OCR, ICR technologies, the AR, VR, some part of some type of AI, along with a number of machine learning models. But it suddenly came into prominence since ChatGPT in the 2022 November. I'm in AI solutions business for a long time, but suddenly all my clients started asking about it. Since last 1.5 years, everybody wants to know about it. And to answer your question exactly, yes, I agree with the views that everybody has already said. That first understand where to start, as is particularly what is a need for the company, what is the objective of bringing AI into the organization? What are the use cases? And based on those use cases, is it going to provide a value for the end users, as well as what kind of value it provides to the business users? And then what are the KPIs we are looking at? So those are some of the things I speak about whenever I give a pitch around AI. So I think I'll stop there. That is, we can discuss more.
Hey, Tom and Deirdre, can I second what Srinivas just said? One key point is what's the business case for even bringing it in? Without that, you have no idea if you're succeeding or failing. I mean, you mentioned the KPIs, of course, and ways to measure it. But with any technology you're bringing in, AI or not, it's always what's the business case for this?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And one of the frustrating things about the literature is that, well, one point though about something Amit said is that they don't distinguish between various types of AI. It's sort of as if you've got to be using AI. And we all know that, well, we've been using AI for over 12 years, as Srinivas said, but it's that each of these tools has the different capabilities. But another very frustrating thing about it, now remember, trying to think as a leader, trying now to build a strategy and a use case for the whole thing, is people like McKinsey are out there writing articles for their audiences saying, well, a way to get involved is to let your people just play with this and see if they can come up with something useful. To a leader, that is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, because of the uncertainty in the results, because of the uncertainty in use, because of the lack of coordination, because of the lack of identifying KPIs and results wanted and all of that sort of stuff, there's no way to tell whether any such use has any value at all, or whether indeed it can cause harm in the organization. So it's fascinating. Let me keep this going by throwing out my next question. And this is one that Tom mentioned at the beginning, which is, why isn't the use of any form of AI treated like any other tech buy? Think about how the processes in buying technology, I mean, you're all used to them, and so forth. So why is AI different? What makes it different? And is this right or not? So Amit, you know this stuff. What do you think?
I'm thinking, I mean, I think because of the vastness of the capabilities that it provides, and it's also the way it's being presented in some areas versus others. The way people are perceiving it, that there's many layers of perception to AI depending on the type of exposure people have had to it. Someone that is extremely new will look at it as a play toy and say, yeah, okay, it's great. Whereas others who have gone really deep into it would really understand and connect the dots for the business value. And because of, I think, the form of the way it is. So when I look at an iPhone as a product, it is a finite set of gadget that you know there is a finite end to its capabilities of what you can do with it, and you control every aspect of it. So from a behavioral perspective, the consumer feels kind of safe. Whereas when you look at an open platform like AI, and if you don't really understand it, it raises a lot more questions initially than answering them. So it's a great answer, but there's no one straight cut answer. Great question, but there's no straight cut answer to it.
I mean, if I may add, I mean, the fundamental purpose of AI is we have developed so many technologies to ease some of the tasks that the human does. But the AI, the ultimate purpose there is to mimic a human, acquire intelligence of a human and behave like human and do tasks like a human. And that has good and bad. And as long as it is doing good job, that means using the right data without bias, using the tasks that are intended to do, that is good. And then again, how speed it is doing, in the good side also there are so many concerns, and in the bad side there are endless concerns, right? Good side is how quickly AI is evolving. Is it going to impact the jobs? And there are so many facets in every vertical, every industry vertical. With the invasion of AI, what is going to happen? And even the day-to-day life. But in the bad side, it has endless. I mean, people are able to imagine some, we don't know what are the unimaginable things. So the problem with AI is it learns, and its advantage, it's good and bad, both. That's my high level.
Naheed, do you have a thought about this particular subject?
Yeah, I have used ChatGPT. It's a very limited, and I think it was wonderful. And as Dieter mentioned in the previous session, there are hallucination and other things. But my main concern is there are so many unknowns, and something about this technology, which is different from the other technology, is it. As Shirin was mentioning, it can mimic human being. At the same time, it creates an environment that you don't know what is real and what is not real. For example, I mean, there are, I'm sure you have seen some of the part of the news, they're showing somebody's talking, but they say, I have never been in that place, I haven't done that talk either. So there are sort of so many unknown, and makes it extremely dangerous if it is not used carefully. That's what scares me, and I don't know that much. I mean, we all are learning about it, but these are the things which is different from other technology. Unknown is more than what we know. That's my main concern.
So Doug, you have to have a thought about this.
I do, and the way, I mean, all of that, yes. I would add in on top of it just general resistance to new technology and fear of new technologies. But the way I would summarize all of that is we're moving from a rules-based kind of programmatic environment to an open, expanded.
Yes.
I think that's kind of what Srinivas was saying, this open, expanded environment. So before we were kind of like, if this, do this. You know, it's kind of almost, even object-oriented programming is almost just an expansion and better way of doing if, then, else, right? You're predefining all the rules. And there's a lot of governance over that. Whereas in this new world, whether it's imitating a human or not, it's doing something new and uncontrolled. And I think that's, I mean, I see it as going to be moving from rule space to kind of like open-ended space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple of provocative questions for you all. One is not mine, it's Deirdre's, but one is mine, okay? So I'm going to give you Deirdre's first, and then I'll give you mine. So Deirdre's question is exactly at what Srinivas is going at. Is that, Srinivas, is that target of human intelligence the Turing test, right? Is the Turing test the right target for us to be using for AI? And the place we're trying to head with AI? That's her question. My question is this: how do you, to exactly, Doug, the point you're on and the point Nahid was on, how do you test the answers? Right? Because we can test almost everything up until now we've used, except quantum, right? On, does 2 + 2 still equal 4? Right? We can say, okay, I'm going to use a SQL database, so I'm going to use some other database, but we know how to test those databases to make sure they're providing us with 2 + 2 = 4. But what we cannot do in the way that we all understand the true definition of machine learning, we don't know an automatic test that we can run that's going to prove. And here's my concern with it. How do and Srinivas, you may know this because I know you work with us all the time. What concerns me is this: you put it into production somewhere in your organization that requires a more definitive answer than just research on soft information, right? Like I completely agree with you all. Searching data, there is nothing more powerful than a good search engine, large language module, right? Model. But once you get into the point where you're trying to optimize for various factors, I'm helping Mayo Clinic do a piece of research on using it in answering patient questions based on the data they have about the patient, and then providing that to the doctor as a prelude to them answering the patient. Well, I just finished going through the second batch of this stuff, which I did on Sunday. And I was going through 200 questions that I had to answer. I was allowed a month to do it, and I finished it on Sunday. And what I found was that frequently, not frequently, 12% of the time, there were conflicting answers. That the machine told the patient to discontinue the medication, where the doctor said, no, continue. Or you were told the opposite. Or it was told, go immediately to the emergency room, versus that's a condition we've seen plenty of times. There's nothing to worry about. If it's still there in a day, come back and let me know, right? Although, I mean, just you can't vary, the conditions were varying. So there's some form of context that it wasn't grabbing. The machine was not grabbing. And by the way, I don't know if the doctor had misread too. The other thing I noticed was sometimes the doctor is misreading the question and not considering all the information by the patient. And I'm very uneducated here, right? So one of the reasons why they use me is because I'm uninformed about it. So my question then was, well, who's right? Right? Because I see the doctor's only answering 2/3 of the question, and that there's a little bit of a conflict. Is it the other part of that question that didn't get answered? Did that have an effect on there appearing to be a slight difference in the way that the machine was recommending something and the patient? Now, it's blind, but I can still tell who did what, right? What did the doctor tell the patient, and what did the machine recommend that the doctor tell him? And this is without the doctor having had the benefit of the machine's answer. So the machine's answer was created after the doctor had already answered the patient. And the reason why the Mayo Clinic can do this is they have patient data that goes back, I forgot, it was 100 and some odd years that they've digitized. So it's fascinating that when there was a lot of context involved, I couldn't tell who managed the context better. And then to get back to the original point, how do I know with a learning algorithm that I may train it, Doug, to your point, I may train it a certain way, but then it's learning along the way. How do I know? How can I test the algorithm after a period of learning to know that it's still providing me with the confidence interval of what I'm expecting in some future period, right? And so if I'm worried about some aspect of bias, define the way we all define it in technology, right? Not social bias, but technology bias. How do I know I'm still getting that, 85% confidence interval, that I'm within that range? And Srinivas, again, you know this technology way better than I do, but are we at the point where we can deal with those kind of questions that Doug is asking, I'm asking, Naheed is asking?
No, we are not there, definitely. This is one of the major concerns. After the Gen AI came in, this has become even a bigger concern that, what is there in the model? How do we understand? Is it doing the intended work or not? How much we can control? And, how do we, I've been talking to multiple industry leaders and in multiple forums. So what I see is there were some proposals like the Eric Schmidt at Google CEO. I saw one of the articles from him asking that the government, when there should be a regulation, everybody accepts to that, to what level, whatever. So one of that suggestion is, why don't you come out with a requirement that every model has to be certified by an external agency, something like a NIST or somebody like that, has to have a regulation that every model has to be certified before it is released to the public. That's one. And I got one other data scientist who was suggesting that it should be taxed heavily, like 80% of any AI invention going into the market should be taxed, so that the growth of the speed of AI growth has to be contained. Otherwise, the industry or the people are not able to catch up to the speed of evolution of AI. But going back to your question, whatever we can understand from the trustworthy AI, ethical AI kind of multiple pointers that are going towards, do you test it? Do you explain what you have developed? Both are not exactly the same. There are variations, but out of them pointing to the same. What I saw in Watson or in Copilot or any of the earlier software also, they try to see they can provide a framework of you select this model, and that basically based on the code that if you're using Watson, for example, because you're using my platform, to some level, I'll be able to explain this is what it is intended to do.
Right.
But that is partial. It's not full. And we do not have a mechanism yet. Even for a regular software, you have 200 different test cases to test one functionality. The intention is one, but the outcomes could be multiple. And so we do variety of testing, right? And for AI, the outcomes are even more and more unpredictable. We do not have the tools or the mechanisms yet, at least to my knowledge, that I'm searching in the industry. I know a couple of my, known people or whatever, I'm following them. They've been releasing books on AI, and particularly Gen AI security, Gen AI testing. But those are all not a proven tools yet. But it's evolving. Maybe in a year, we can see good number of tools coming into the market for the testing and explainability of the AI models.
Srinivas, can I ask you? So in Tom's case, he has data going back I think he said 100 years of medical data. Is there not enough data there to use for training to be able to, and then as you mentioned KPIs, to say like I need at least 99% people living at the end of these decisions? I mean, it seems like in a case like that, you could probably define it, or am I misunderstanding?
Now, one important question from what Professor Tom mentioned is, can we ensure 85% of the accuracy? So when you said the expectation level is at 85%, I am a bit skeptical about, are we there yet? I mean, are we able to think about multiple scenarios? Those are intended and unintended. If you are looking at say, 20 scenarios that I am looking at, are we able to fulfill with whatever data I have and the outcome? I think yes, because you are looking at 20, you will check against them, you're good. That in a traditional software testing methodology, we'll say positive testing. So the unintended outcomes, which you are not sure about how the model is using the data and producing something, particularly the bias. We can control the bias to a great extent because it's a known data, control data within one organization. It is not open data from the internet. And that's what the industry is trying to do, that I will develop a model that works only within my context so that the bias can be eliminated to a great extent. But the accuracy level of 85%, 95%, or even 70%, I didn't come yet in touch with any model that is able to promise it is 75% accurate. It may be there, I'm missing probably something, I don't know, but as of now, I didn't come across.
And Doug, I wasn't clear enough on why I was troubled by this. And so let me take it to the next level, because I know you'll see this when I tell you this. What I saw was that the machine did not do a good job of figuring out whether the question the patient asked was a valid question, or whether the machine should re-ask the question in a valid way and then answer the valid way. Because what it seemed to me was the machine took the question to be a literal question and a valid question and answered that way. Where the doctor, I thought, more often than not, did in fact, when the question was not a good question, the doctor reformulated the question in the way they answered the question, right? And now, there were times when I thought both failed, because I saw the patient actually asking even a different question. Now, I am not purporting that I'm smarter than a doctor at the Mayo Clinic. I'm just telling you that I was really careful, because I went back and reread the question at least 4 times for every one I looked at, and then thought how I would interpret that. And I would say there was about 5% where I thought neither one really answered at a core level what the patient was getting at. And when you go through this, and I've been through now about, I don't know, total since I've started, almost 1,000 questions that patients are asking the Mayo Clinic in various disciplines. You find out 2 things. Most people can't write. Most people don't know how to state the facts. Most people give too much context. And many people don't know how to ask the question in a clear way, in a sequential way. Some do a brilliant job. I mean, some do a really brilliant job, but I would say the vast majority do not, and give way too much context that is not relevant to what they're asking about. But Doug, it's that complexity, it's that subtlety in there that caused me to many times have to side with the doctor. And then the time I sided with the machine, it was when the doctor, I thought, didn't take into account everything the patient said, because they only answered one of the 3 questions that were being asked there. Now, as I said, what I don't know is, were those 3 questions they didn't ask, were they really relevant? Or maybe the most relevant was that one. And if that one got solved, the others don't matter, right? That's the kind of thing I would never know. But I did write all that stuff up. But that's what's a little bothersome about this, is when it gets into what I kept seeing and what kept occurring to me in the answers were that they were not subtle enough for that. I think ChatGPT and the way it functions and Copilot, those have been outstanding for me to use because the questions are really simple. Either I ask it in a good way or I don't. I get an answer that's valid or I don't. I can tell, right? Because I'm asking a question, I know kind of what to expect. But the point that's bothered me is, Srinivas, is that point exactly that you're on, is how do I know as the algorithm is learning, how do I know that a year from now, that's still going to give me 2 + 2 and not head me in a direction that the production data is doing? Now, I agree. You could take the algorithm and recertify it back to the original design. You could do that, but not having explainability built into it, or explainability that's valid at the 80% level or whatever we think is a valid confidence interval, is not a very comfortable feeling, right? And so when you combine all of that, even though I've given you a very lengthy and probably unnecessary discussion about this, that's the kind of stuff that bothers me. And I'm not in it like you guys are, right? Doug, you have to make these decisions. Srinivas, you do. Amit, you do. Naheed, you do. I don't. But that's what has been bothering me. And I know has been bothering Deirdre. Deirdre's been very close to the literature for the last 4 months.
And this is it's been very interesting to me. I was actually surprised when I asked the first question that you all seem to think, oh yeah, we as leaders will be using this stuff, so no problem in using it. But then when we start to talk about the uncertainty and about the changing nature of the underlying algorithms and the stability of it, and an 80% result is not sufficient for me as a leader, I think, to take on the enterprise risk. And so what am I going to need for this stuff to do, and to what level am I going to need for it to perform at, for me to feel comfortable on it? One of the, I'm going to mention this again. I mentioned it back on April 21st, the Air Canada case, which I think has a lot of leaders sitting up, in which Air Canada was using for customer service a chatbot, which gave a customer wrong information on which that customer based a purchase. And when that information turned out to be wrong, the customer sued Air Canada and the customer won. Air Canada lost that case because its chatbot gave the wrong information. That's the sort of thing. And that's not going to be a lone episode there. There are going to be more and more of these. And chatbots are actually probably the most simple implementation of these things. So if we're talking about deeper uses of the various forms of Gen AI, how safe is this? How reliable is it? And let me take this one step further. And I'm starting to get at the question of why is this different as a real tech buy? Because the tech buy, the analyses tend to be done in terms of usage across a whole organization. Leaders tend to think not in terms of the discrete uses that are often going on in relation to Gen AI, but they tend to think of cross-department, cross-silos, cross-functionality uses, and how do the results gotten in one area flow into the results in another area, and what implications does that mean here? The classic example is that the marketing departments were the lead in using data analytics. I'm going back 10 years now, but it was only the marketing department using the data analytics, and no one, until everyone sat up and said, whoa, the marketing department is using this stuff. Why isn't sales using this? What does this mean for inventory? What does this mean for distribution? What does that mean for the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera? And that's when some of the real uses of the beginnings of machine learning and algorithms and so forth in marketing became not a marketing project, but a company-wide project. And that's when it became a company-wide tech purchase of whatever was being done. So why aren't we thinking like that about Gen AI? Is it that Gen AI is or can only be at this point very discrete uses of this, or is there potential for making it a broader use enterprise-wide with effects in multiple departments? I've kind of been rambling on in sort of a broad question here, but what do you think? Is it discrete or is it enterprise-wide?
I have one question, kind of relate in terms of liability, because we are speaking about the output. And in my interactions with a lot of folks, most people misconstrue AI with automation. Automation to me is extremely logical. You have rules in place, and as long as those rules are met, certain things are done. That's been there for decades.
Yeah.
Whereas AI is it's thinking for you. But then the question I have is it thinking in the right direction? And the answers that it is giving you, what is the credibility of that? And I'll give an example that we tried as a use case. So we shut down a data center and moved to AWS, but before we did that, we have a full architecture diagram, looking at every aspect of how that would look in AWS. That diagram we just uploaded in our private subscription for ChatGPT, and it gave a very generic output. Your design is generally good. You followed all the best practices, yada yada, so on and so. Okay, but if I just went with that and I got breached, who is liable for that? So to me, it is always for a nominal general use where the information, like the Air Canada example, where this individual made a purchase, they made a financial decision based on that information, which was counterproductive for them. It was inaccurate. And how far does that decision making go? This was just a purchase with a refund. Then you can go next step and say life-threatening decisions where people's lives depend on it. And what I'm starting to hear is synthetic information where LLMs are talking to each other and generating information. How real is that? What is the source of truth? So when I start to look at it from that perspective, I go back and say, let's start with AI in a manner that if the information is incorrect, no harm, no foul. We learn from it.
And you are
Absolutely.
getting at what I think is a core here, which is automation is known and tested. You know, we can trust automation by and large, as long as it's well done. But now what is happening in the press? Now, remember that leaders get their information from the press, the business press, what they hear out there, and so forth, is that there's a conflation among the types of AI. That AI, if we think about AI as everything from automation to robotics, to machine learning, to Gen AI, people are saying, yes, use AI. And then the discussion is immediately jumped to Gen AI and ChatGPT and so forth.
Right. Yeah.
And that is
Absolutely.
confusing for leaders. And this is where I believe companies are running into significant trouble, in which they're trying to let their young digital natives, and this is the way some people phrase these things, let your young digital natives play with this stuff, trying to let them do things with it without the testing, without the validity, without the use case, without the KPIs, without anything about it. And for me as a leader, that would make my skin crawl.
Yeah. So you all
Absolutely.
gotta have some thoughts on this stuff, right?
So, I mean, just to add there, when the ChatGPT, I mean, this is what I've seen in the market. We were struggling to, AI was an unknown animal for people. We were struggling to go to clients and tell them that, okay, these are the three technologies. At least everybody understands RPA as an automation. When I say conversational AI, that's too much. Just chatbot, good enough. Just OCR, ICR, or document understanding. Those are the three known to people. And if anybody is in the manufacturing side, a little bit about the IoT, the sensors and the data coming in there, how do we monetize the data? So those were the things. When ChatGPT came, now suddenly everybody was under pressure all organizations, what are we doing for it? What is the response? Number one, because we don't know anything about the response, don't use ChatGPT within the organization. Majority of the organizations, they have banned it. All right. So, Professor Adria, as you said, these are the various facets of how a corporate can use, but what is the control? What is the reliability? And how we can trust? Those are the very natural questions. As it came into text, it is very evident at that point of time that it is going into generative in voice, in image, in video, in every facet of what we see as far as the senses go, right? And as people expected, in the next 8 months, 9 months, it evolved into multimodal, large language models, a large multimodal, large action models now, right? LMMs and LAMs, kind of multiple ways of evolution that came in already. So when you ask the question, is it just multiple phases of the technology? Is the organization good enough to go into that? How far it is, it should be experimental or enterprise-wide. It is still in evolution. Standard, there are 6 or 7 ways of using it as of today, as Amit has already pointed out. Generic, non-invasive, not impacting the end users much, so that you are not liable. Something like a call summarization, which would help the call center executives internally for a doctor's clinical document summarization, or maybe a financial analyst, the financial document, summarization kind of. And a very good use is internal search. That means you want an SME that's there from this is a picture of one of the products, leading products, that you have an old SME there who is there from the inception of the company since the last 100 years, and he knows everything about this company. So you ask him to know internal information. It's not going out within your company. You need some data. You're asking this, agent internally. So that is another use case that's picked up. So these are some. I can list out another 4 or 5 of them. But basically, when you look at that, it will go into customer experience or internal, like supplier to, in the supply chain, supplier to the organization based on the size of the organization. If you have 2,000 suppliers, a good chatbot, which can add some context to the conversation and give you an information. Those suppliers are not going to sue you most likely, and we may have to revalidate that. What are the checks and balances to be brought in there, kind of. So those are some of the use cases that are in each vertical. When you say McKinsey's and Gartner's, you see at least top 20 to top 50 probably, but you may have to choose which is the best business case for you. But if you go that way, as Amit has pointed out, generic and not going to put you in liability corner, then they're good, in my view.
What's kind of interesting there is you don't see much talked about the organizational costs of doing this, and that's the cost of the people and the data and the process changes and things like that. If we're only talking, and I'm asking this question for information, given all of the costs, is it worth it for just these few uses, do you think?
Again, the answer is no, that it is evolving. But for example, you need GPU, and GPU utilization is expensive. And so naturally, what you're saying is it's going to be just like Bitcoin is not going to, it was not able to really be adopted all over because it's very expensive. Wherein I'm seeing some technologies coming in here as something like a LoRa. It's basically using the resources. You're not going to train the entire LLM. The LLM is already coming up with billions of parameters. And whatever is the delta, you're training that for your organization. So that is the concept that they came up with in LoRa. I read that, but I didn't do extensive research there, so I didn't I don't remember the exact full form of that, but those are the technologies that are coming in, which I believe are going to be proving us that it is going to be not that expensive. It's going to be somewhere affordable for companies when you compare to the investment. As of today, yeah, the investment may not be worth it for a lot of business cases. But unless you see an ROI, which organization will go and fund it just for the sake of we are using GenAI, right? So it's going to be, the technology has to come out for that. And I think 2024 is that year where we see more of those advancements come.
So
Let-
Nahid, I saw you open your microphone.
Who is?
Oh, I thought you were getting ready to make a comment a minute ago, so I saw
Yes,
you.
I did. Are you talking to me, Tom?
Yes,
Yes, I did. I have a question. I just want to add to what Deidre mentioned, and I'm going to focus on Gen AI, which by definition means creating new content such as text, image, or video based on the input. My question, as Tom was saying earlier, and also Deidre was saying, how do you trust this? These are my issues. And how do you test these? So these are the things. And then Srinivas mentioned earlier that these technology need to be certified. So how do you test them to certify them? These are my issues, like the trust.
Nahid,
and
I'm
test-
very disappointed in you. Here you are, a technologist from Carnegie Mellon, and you're asking me those questions. Why are you asking me these questions?
because this is the technology, they have so many unknowns, and I haven't done in the AI for a
No,
long
I
time.
mean, I'm with you. I mean, I have to tell you, I want to hear from both Doug and Amit here.
Sure.
But I have to tell you, I have two questions I want to deal with on the next time we get together and do this, which I hope will be next month this time. One is, how do we deal with these SaaS algorithms, right? I mean, do we know when we're using a Microsoft or we're using an Amazon or we're using an IBM algorithm, do we know what they are moving around with their testing and their learning of that algorithm? And if we don't have enough data, is somebody supplementing them, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that scares me. And then I'd like to come back to this point about the Turing test. Are we really, Deirdre's question, are we really aiming at the right point with where we'd like to see AI be targeted? And is it really the human intelligence? But I'm going to put those aside. I want to hear from both Amit and Doug on this because I'm going to stop us here really soon because it's getting late out east.
Amit, you want to go first, and I'll
Please,
close
Doug,
it
please.
out?
Go ahead, Doug. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the thought I've been having to kind of encapsulates all this to me is the case of self-driving cars.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure. I don't know how they're designed, how much is rules-based, how much is, AI decision-based, but there was a great like radio show that they went into some of this, and they went to a car show, and I won't say what make it was, but they asked the vendor who was doing self-driving cars, how does it make a decision when between if there's a critical decision to be made, life decision between the driver and a pedestrian, who wins? And the vendor said, who's going to buy a car that's going to kill the driver? That's going to choose a, right? And so, to me, part of the scariness, including all the stuff that was already said and really well said, is that, how it's being implemented and who the vendor is and who's in control of this thing. This automated car, self-driving car stuff is a real life, and now example of this stuff just coming into our world where we may not even, I may be a pedestrian in that situation, right? And the vendor is not going to sell a car that's going to kill the driver. So I think that's part of the scariness to me, is who's really pulling the strings on all of this.
I'm going to stop us. I'm going to stop us here. It's right at the top of the hour. You all, it's been wonderful to see everybody. And fortunately, these are all our friends and colleagues. And I hope that you all will agree that we'll continue this next month. I'd like to do this same time, same place, because there are just too many questions that I think we need to answer. And Deirdre's continuing to scurry the literature and see what everything is being told. I mean, Deirdre, you must have read 6 books. The one thing I will tell you is Deirdre is going to launch, and you'll see this coming up in the announcements of the event. She's going to launch a book discussion called Nonsense or Not. And we're going to, I see Doug laughing. And she's going to take books like Blue Ocean Strategy, right? Things we know. And she's going to go through and we're going to have a discussion, and you all are going to tell her whether you think it's nonsense or not. And I think it's wonderful. And she has a bunch of books. She's going to launch that for the summer, so we have something interesting to talk about in the summer. But look forward to that. But I'm going to stop us.